Ready? Ready, Mr. Steve?
I'm ready.
Perfect. Welcome to another Launch It podcast. Today, as always, you got me, Matt.
I got myself, KP, and joining us today is Steve. He had a wonderful background, but due to some technical difficulties, we had to get rid of it. But he's joining us from the Port of Windsor, and we're going to be learning a lot of things today. It's been a while since we did a podcast, but we're going to be here to learn a lot of things, and I'll let Matt take it over.
Well, let Matt take it over from here.
I usually do that this one last week, so I'll let you take this one.
Well, Steve, thanks for joining us. The big question, I guess, I guess most people would wonder is, tell us a little bit about yourself in the Port of Windsor first. So tell us what happens at the Port of Windsor, because I don't think a lot of people realize there is a port in Windsor.
Well, it's a great intro, because the truth is I came here 3 years ago, not from the port world. I've come from a lot of administrative government backgrounds, public sector backgrounds, but grew up in this city. Literally grew up 2 blocks from the riverfront. Was general manager at the city of Windsor. Was a government lead on the construction of a $2 billion parkway and the site selection for a $6 billion Gordie Howe Bridge to the United States from Windsor to Detroit. And what astounded me is when this job became available 3 years ago, despite that geography, despite those roles, despite the fact that I lived in the city all my life, other than a couple of gravel piles and an oil tank, I had no idea where or what the Port of Windsor was. My wife, in fact, told me, hey, you should apply this job. They're looking for a president. I said, what the hell do I know about ports? And apparently I knew enough to become president, but which I hope doesn't say too little. But
Your boss is not watching.
yeah. But having said that, what astounded me is that, in preparing for the job, for the interview, I come to realize how critically important ports are. We all see them. We see ships docked, in every major lakeside or seaside town we go to. But what we don't realize, and what I didn't realize anyways, and when I talk to people, is how big they are. Every day, 850 people to come to work in the Port of Windsor. We generate $270 million in activity. We buy $42 million worth of local product every year. $60 million in wages go back out into the community every year. And we have impacts on the community too, because we might be on the border, two fairly good sized cities, one for Canada, Windsor, and Detroit's a major American city. But the truth is, once you leave the municipality here, you're in a large rural agricultural area. And, I find out that a 4-liter jug of oil that I've been buying, or the fries I've been buying at McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King, all comes from vegetable oil made right here in Port Windsor. ADM, one of the largest food companies in the world, has a large seed crushing plant here. And they buy 80% of all seed, all soybean, corn that's grown in 3 counties around here, plus shiploads and shiploads of canola oil from the prairies. And that's going on here. I find out we have a salt mine that provides Toronto, Chicago, Toledo, Thunder Bay with road salt. I knew we had a road salt plant, but I figured local. No, it's across the area. I find out that when you hear of European steel and Japanese steel, Korean steel, these are specialty products that are coming into our industry. They're coming through Port Windsor from across the globe. Then we're shipping out grains, to South America, to Europe. Suddenly Windsor is a major player on the globe because of the port. And then I learned other things about our port here, that we have the largest ship fueling depot on the Great Lakes. I saw these large, oil tanks, on the side. I thought, well, they're kind of unsightly, what are those for? I find out how critically important they are to this community and to the shipping industry. But, the truth is that it's a very invisible industry to us all. Most of us don't see the productivity. Often it's fenced off. It's usually in a more industrial area. We have no real desire or need to go see it. Or if we could see it, it's probably more fascinating to younger children to say, hey, look, a big boat, because I think I was that kid.
Yeah.
But now I realize that, those ships, affect everything we do. It's a stat, Matt, I know 90% of everything we touch, we wear, we eat, we sleep on, anything, goods and products in our home, in our workplaces, 90% of them have been on a ship at some point in their life cycle. That's just an extraordinary number.
It's crazy. Even the interprovincial connection, because I grew up in St. Catharines, and you talk about looking at the boats. I used to go to the Welland Canal, and I used to just watch the boats go up and down. You look at the flag, and you'd realize how much international boats would come through. But I guess my question for you is, you talk about the prairie grain. Does that pick up like the port of Thunder Bay then, and then come down to Windsor?
That's correct. Yeah, I think, we all grew up in school hearing about, the lakehead, Thunder Bay, we all learned about the waves of wheat on the prairies. Frankly, it's more canola now than wheat. It's more valuable, but that's exactly what happens. That product, across 3 entire provinces is harvested. Some of it's put on rail cars and sent out to Vancouver for eastern destinations, but a good amount of it as well, about 10 million tons a year, comes through Thunder Bay. Some of it's going to local markets like us. We need that canola in order to process it into vegetable oil. We also then when we extract the oil out of it, it becomes a high protein animal feed, and that's fed into Europe and South America. A very important product for us. And because of their grain handling capacities, they not only purchase and process grains, they also purchase and process grains for the purpose of export, which is so vital to our economy. We've long been a breadbasket to the world. That hasn't changed. We certainly are, an industrial economy. We're certainly a much smarter economy now, but agriculture and food will always be core to our economy. And although we tend to see ourselves here as the automotive city, we're also a major agricultural player, which includes our own grains and Thunder Bay grains. Now, 10 million tons a year out of Thunder Bay. If you put 25,000 ton of the ship, do the math, you can imagine just how many ships are going in and out of Thunder Bay. And every single one of them pass Windsor on their way out to either Montreal or world destinations.
So you got ships coming from like Europe, they go down St. Lawrence, down the Welland Canal, and up into
Yes. Yeah, they what they tend to do, just like a truck doesn't want to run empty one way, they tend to bring product in. So if they're bringing steel in from somewhere across the globe for manufacturing in Canada, the United States, they will stop at a port somewhere along the lakes, and then get up to Thunder Bay to refill with grain and come on back. That's really important, that they're not running empty or sitting still. Yeah, it's a large logistics operation.
What do you think, AP?
I was saying we should pull up the map of that in terms of maybe edit it in after to kind of show the.
Oh, the boats on the sea where you can do the marine traffic, yeah. Because you don't really look at the Great Lakes as marine traffic. See, when everybody, I know at least me, even in logistics, when you think of boats, you think of the what are they called? The Pemex ones that go to the big container.
Panamax, yes.
That's what everybody thinks of, 10,000, what is it, 10,000 TEUs or whatever that.
Well, that's what they used to be. Yeah, they used to be 10,000 TEUs, something equivalent, basically a container. Yeah. And, and now they're well to 16,000, 18,000. The newest ones that just came out are in the 20,000 range, and Korea and China are now designing new ones in the 25, 26,000 range. So when you imagine or visualize a container ship in your mind, those are probably 8,000, 10,000, those traditional ships. The new ones are 3 times longer than a football field. They're wider and longer than an aircraft carrier. These are just massive vessels, and they're and the height of them, it's not measured in tens; it's measured in hundreds of feet.
Wow! No wonder I got stuck in the Suez Canal.
Yeah. Well, the Suez is a great question. Is a great thing to bring up. I mean, we all learned how critical that passageway was, and when that ship got beached and blocked the Suez, and there was traffic backing up all week long. Well, the Detroit River, because everything that's going between the upper and lower lakes, we're the connector. We're really more of a strait than a river. It was a bad naming 100 or 200 years ago, but we're stuck with it now. More vessels pass through the Detroit River on a daily basis than the Suez Canal. This is a very busy waterway. We are the largest, longest, busiest inland waterway in the world. And again, it's invisible to us. We're a quiet industry. Yeah. And yet, we are importing and selling and moving product across the 5 Great Lakes between Canada and the U.S. and across the globe.
That boggles my mind. I didn't even know that's a huge number, because everybody thinks of the Suez Canal as being like one of the most trafficked besides the Panama Canal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Saying that the Detroit Strait, I guess, the better naming.
Yeah. Yes, we'll rename it on this show.
It's official. We dubbed it first. It's far more. I've gone to the Detroit. It doesn't feel like there's that many boats. But when you look at, I guess that you haven't sat the Suez. It's only my mind that says there's so much more. That's interesting.
Yeah.
So tell us maybe a little bit more about the Port of Windsor, the operation itself. Is it the way that people picture in their minds? Because I know people usually see when they think of a port. I don't know about UK people. When I think of a port, I think of like Rotterdam or Hamburg. You got these giant cranes. You see containers. And now, from the sounds of it, it's not what most ports are like. It's not definitely what.
No, those aren't inland water ports. Again, when we think of ports and shipping, we think of those Panamax. We think of containers and container ships and the giant overhead cranes lifting the containers out and sliding them down on the trucks below. Those are seaside ports, and most certainly we have those in this country. We have some very large ones: Montreal, Quebec. Most certainly Vancouver and Prince Rupert. I mean, these are big ports on a world scale. But the ports that we have in the inland waters, whether it's Windsor or Chicago, Hamilton or Minnesota, Thunder Bay or Detroit, we deal with really the import-export of product into the industrial heartland, or into really the economic heartland of North America. And out of the economic, back out to the world. The truth is, those large Panamax, even the 8,000 size ships that are now 10, 20 years old, those are simply too massive and too large to get into the Great Lakes. They will not get through the St. Lawrence. There are locks on the St. Lawrence as well, and they most certainly will not get through the Welland Canal. 760 feet, I think, is the Welland Canal, and that's it. So when you see 1,000-foot ships on the Upper Great Lakes, they never leave the Upper Great Lakes. They're moving, iron ore, or coal, or grain, between Cleveland, Thunder Bay, Hamilton, Windsor, Detroit, Duluth, etc. So there are really 2 types of shipping systems in the world, and that's why we have the term salties, which are seagoing vessels. Which are really, the major ports that we tend to think of when we think of a port, where they're internally, it's the delivery and export from local markets, supplying local markets, but also supplying the world. Now, what's interesting is when they developed the Welland Canal in the 50s, no one really moved back and forth. You had smaller ships in the Upper Lakes, and you had some ocean vessels that were small enough to get through the St. Lawrence and serving Lake Ontario. And that's as far as they went. And when they built the Welland Canal, the Upper Lake shippers realized, oh my goodness, they're going to come in and eat our lunch now. So they decided they had to build ships that could go, that were big enough to go that way. And that's why we created and now have what we see as that classic Laker profile, the long ship with the cap on the end, or the captain's house in the front and the engine on the back. That was in direct competition to the world trade. Now, those ships don't leave the Great Lakes. They'll go as far as Montreal, maybe, but not much further. They can't cross the ocean reliably, but they're Great Lakes ships. And that's true across the globe. I mean, the busiest one of the busiest waterways in North America is the Mississippi. And those are simply barges. If you've been to New Orleans or anywhere along the Mississippi, you see these very wide, flat barges that, that have very low draft, only a few feet draft. And they move so much product down to the Gulf of Mexico, one after another. And so you adapt to your local conditions, and usually it's got to do with water depth and navigation. These big ocean vessels can't navigate or get enough draft to come through the Great Lakes.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I guess something that I was interested in is because of the whole COVID-19 situation, how did it kind of pan out when everything onset in last year, and where things are in terms of your operation at the port?
Well, in the beginning, none of us knew what was happening. We didn't understand the COVID. We didn't understand the impacts locally or globally. We didn't know if this was a short-term or a long-term thing. So I think we reacted as humans tend to. We acted out of fear and self-protection. And so one of the more immediate causes were people were afraid of ships from outside of their community. In particular, they weren't so afraid of other Canadian ships or American ships coming through the communities. They were afraid of foreign vessels coming into the Great Lakes. And there was a move to say that, no, nobody can get off the ship. Well, these people have been at sea for several weeks, sometimes, they've been on a ship for several months. And under international convention, they're allowed to come off, go locally to get supplies, for personal needs or medical, etc. But many ports, and virtually all ports in the beginning, were saying no one's allowed to leave the ship. Sorry. Well, we have an international convention. Tough. We're protecting our community. And as we learned more about the disease, and as we became, frankly, a little more rational and reasonable, it also became apparent that we were seeing the situation completely from the wrong side. It turned out that it was the ship's captain who was deathly afraid of us. His crew had been at sea for 2 weeks or 4 weeks. They're fine. They've all been quarantined. They had no choice. They've been at sea, right? They come into our community and they say, no, just stay at the end of the gangplank. Don't come on my ship. And so we suddenly the tables turned on us, and we felt a little silly. Yeah. And we thought, what were we afraid of? Of course they're fine. They've been on ship for weeks, and we had to protect them. So a couple of things happened. We decided we needed to have a local response to ships coming to our community, to let them know that we take their safety and health seriously. But we also had a public relations issue with our community, and many communities, to share that story and information as well, that we are taking measures and precautions to ensure that visiting foreign ships that are visiting our community or docking our community are not at risk to us. So we had to allay those concerns. So we created a concept of safe ports, and it was a certification process that you had to have protocols in place, controls in place, record keeping in place, much like you do in workplaces anywhere. If you've been anywhere, check your temperature. When's the last time you had exposure to somebody else in another country. And that brought great relief to those ships to know that we are a safe port. Windsor was the first in Canada that we were a safe port. Then we also certified ships as well to say these are safe ships. They have taken precautions. They've gone through a checklist, and we're satisfied. Our national association did this, that we're satisfied that fact that they are doing all the right things to protect their health and safety and our community's health and safety. So that was a good thing. Now, one of the real sad things is because of all the restrictions, travel restrictions across the globe, it turned out that these crews who had the misfortune of being on a ship back in March of 2020, many of them were still on a ship as recently as January or February. They cannot get crew exchanges. They exchange crews by pre-arrangements where they'll fly a crew into a community and then they switch. All 14 will leave, 14 will come on, and then they're at sea again for a month, 2 or 3, depending on the shipping line and the country. But they couldn't get a crew exchange because Canada and every other major Western country certainly wouldn't let these crews fly into our country. We had travel restrictions. Or they had to quarantine for 2 weeks or 3 weeks somewhere, and the shipping companies weren't prepared to do it. So they, too many of these companies that are flagged offshore simply said, "You're not leaving." And so we had, I believe, in the first 6 or 8 months, we had about 1.5 million seafarers who had not been off the ship in 6 months. Yeah, it was almost a floating prison for them. And I think if you realize that, Canadian and American ships, we live by American Canadian laws, but those aren't the laws around the globe. And much as when we visit, tourist destinations, we realize these people aren't making $20 an hour. Well, and their working conditions are so great. It's not untrue on ships on the globe as well. It's, our North American standard of labor is not a world standard, unfortunately. And so they are pretty much, they were pretty much contained in that ship with nowhere to go. They couldn't get off because they were, no country would let them get off. And frankly, they didn't have a crew to replace them, and neither did the captain want to risk them getting off and getting contaminated and contaminating his whole crew. And now his ship is stuck because he can't get a replacement crew. So it became a real labor management, not labor management. It became a human resource issue. How do you maintain morale on a ship for months upon months with no replacements, the absence from their families, no shore leave, no recreation leave? At the same time, how do you maintain their productivity and their morale and and the spirits aboard? I mean, I'm sure it was not only emotionally difficult for many of these sailors or seafarers, but I'm sure it was a real management task as well to keep these people working and keep the temperature down.
That's crazy.
It'd be interesting if there's like a psychologist or scientist on one of these ships who just done like a case study with like people on the ship.
Yeah, because it goes probably back to the days of like when we used to sail across in wooden boats, where you'd take months to go across the Atlantic, and you'd hear stories of people go crazy. It's the same thing here. Like I can imagine being in a small boat for a year.
Yeah, some of these ships have fairly decent accommodations. Others are a little older and not so decent.
Yeah, well, because a lot, like you were saying, a lot more flagged outside of Canada for whatever purposes and reasons. So they have different labor standards. They don't even use Canadian crews half the time because they're obviously too pricey. So how many? That's an interesting statistic. Would you know how many Canadian boats are out on the Great Lakes? Is it majority Canadian flag boats, or?
I don't know the numbers. I wish I did. We have a number of major carriers. Obviously, we have Navcan, CSL, Algoma. These are major Canadian shipping companies. You see their boats on the lakes all the time. You stand the Welland or the Troy River here. Number of American companies. So if they're a laker, they're American or Canadian. But you'll see probably on the lake, probably a third to a half are foreign vessels.
Crazy. So what are some of the countries that you see coming through the Port of Windsor that you wouldn't expect to see at the Port of Windsor? Like what's the most? What's one that stumped you and you went, wow, I didn't know these guys came all the way to port?
Certainly we have Chinese ships. That's literally the other side of the globe. Russian ships. They certainly from all over Europe. Korean ships, Japanese ships, ships from Northern Europe, Norway. Yeah.
How do the Chinese ships? So they go across the Panama, or they go across South Africa? Like how do they get here?
It depends on where they were. I mean, it depends where they were going, right? If they may have come through the Panama, if they're coming here, directly. Depends, they may have had a shipment elsewhere in the globe and it was more direct to come here. They may have worked their way the opposite way, to Vancouver and then through the Panama. We never know, but mostly through the Panama. So the Panama is the most direct route, to Europe and Eastern markets. It's one of the reasons, of course, why the western seaports of Prince Rupert and Vancouver, Seattle, Long Beach, they're doing so well because of that direct route to the Asian market and transportation of goods. But it's still a lot of transportation across North America, and it's cheaper and better logistics to ship it. Take another many days and go through the Panama and into the Eastern market directly. But
what's the typical transit time for a boat like that? Like, do you know? I
don't know.
They got me all curious about that because that's what I thought. You're going all the way into the lakes. You're going from China. You're going across the Panama. You're going up the coast. You're coming down the same way.
Yeah, I know it's only a few days across the Atlantic, but across the Pacific down to Panama and up again. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah.
And plus, they're smaller boats. They're coming down to the lakes too, right? So I think imagine going across the Pacific on the smaller boat. You got a 150-foot swell of an ocean.
Oh yeah.
And then you get
yeah, I mean you are somewhat. Yeah, I mean these ocean salties that come into the Great Lakes, they're plus 400, less 700. They're between 400 and 700 foot. These aren't big ships to be out, as you say, in a 100-foot wave.
Yeah.
Yeah. You feel a bit like a top. You feel a bit like a cork bobbing in water, I'm sure.
Well, but you even think about Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, they're a little bit choppy, but like Lake Superior, the waves get pretty damn big too, and it's windy and it's not the best.
The Edmund Fitzgerald, right? Yeah.
So it's I don't know. It seems like a precarious job in itself. So these guys are kudos to them. We do the thank the trucker, which we thank a shipper here at the very least or something.
Yeah, I just couldn't imagine to be out in the middle of the ocean. It's when they're dealing with waves on a regular basis that are literally a wall of water, coming towards you, and you go up and over them or through them a bit. To do that for hours or days on end is more courage than I have.
So I know you and I talked about maybe the neat statistic about Port of Windsor. What's the size in terms of Canada? I think it's the third or fourth.
Yeah, well, again, that's right. I mean, so we're across Canada, there are 17 major national ports. There are dozens, if not a couple of hundred smaller ports that are not national ports. On the Great Lakes, we are the third largest Canadian port and number 10 in the country. So I mean, again, growing up here, not realizing that not only the economic impacts, but to realize our place in the country. Windsor is certainly not number 10 as a city in the country. We are as a port.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So what number 1 and 2 be?
I think Vancouver's 1 in Canada, right?
Oh, number 1 is Vancouver. Yeah. To give you a sense of scale perspective, the ports in the Great Lakes, do a couple of million to about 10 million tons a year. We're between 5 and 6 million a year. Hamilton around 10, Thunder Bay around 8, and Oshawa, Toronto, they do 2-3 million. But Vancouver, 150 million ton.
Oh wow.
Yeah. A lot of Panamax ships.
Yeah. Well, that's another neat thing too. Like people have caught on to that, but Port of Windsor is bigger than the Port of Toronto, right? Like,
yeah, I think that surprises people. Yeah.
The Port of Toronto that you were telling me, I think you were saying it's owned by the airport authority, right?
Well, or they own the airport. Probably a better way of saying it. It's the Toronto Port Authority, and they run the island airport.
Yeah.
It's a pretty it's a historical link there, I guess. If you control the harbor and the islands in the harbor, and 100 years later they build an airport, you own it. Yeah. I mean, what's fascinating about the Toronto Harbor Authority, of course, is what we know as Queen's Quay is all infill for the last century. At one point, I mean, if you've ever been in downtown Toronto, right next to the Gardner is a beautiful stone building on Water Street, of course, which is Toronto Harbour Authority's headquarters. That front porch facing the lake was literally on the water. They have a painting in the main lobby of getting off a boat onto the front steps and going to the Toronto Port Authority. That was the lake's edge. And everything from there to the lake has been infilled. And the Toronto Port Authority has some kind of license or lease or something. So, ports are not just water. We're also major leasing companies and land development companies on the waterfront. And that's certainly true in Toronto, true in Hamilton. Here in Windsor, we own many properties, but there are some private still. But we also, of the properties we own, we lease them out to large companies. We lease out to companies like Lafarge, St. Mary's Cement, Canada Building, and other local operators here. We also, when we tend to think of the Windsor Harbor, it's tough to think about that when you think of the Detroit River or Detroit Strait of being a nice round harbor like Hamilton or Boston or something. But it is still our harbor, and so when many people live in the waterfront in Windsor, and as they build in their seawalls and build docks at the back of their house, you're now in Windsor Harbor or within Port Authority property. So we lease them riverbed space. We lease air rights to the Ambassador Bridge so they can go over our harbor. We lease air rights to Ontario Hydro to put hydro lines across the river, and Kinder Morgan to put pipelines under our river. So it's not just shipping. It's also we're also a major lease company.
It sounds like you guys are a connection, a vital position for the community that people don't even realize without the port authorities, because it's such it's such an old system that's been around for such a long time.
Yeah.
Neglected for such a long time, right? And they don't realize how much activity they do.
Absolutely. Let me look at every community on water was located there because of trade. Right. Our office is located in the, if you've been through Windsor and the Ambassador Bridge, that's the main port area, the industrial older part of Windsor, known as Sandwich, named after England, Sandwich, England. This is the oldest continuous settlement west of Montreal. There was a Sandwich or a Windsor before there was a London or Hamilton or Montreal or Toronto or Kingston, etc. This is it. It was Montreal, then here. And it was located here because, for the same reason that we're here today and so successful today, it was a very short crossing to the land to what is now the States, right? Versus Lake Ontario or Lake Erie crossing, you could cross the Detroit River very easily and quickly. The First Peoples knew that 10,000 years ago. This is the oldest indigenous settlement in this region. This was a main crossing point and camping point because of trade. They would gather from what we now know as Michigan and Upper Lake area, and from Southwest Ontario, they would come here and gather and trade. Again, because it was so easy to cross. Well, that's the reason today we're so popular, as a crossing. More goods flow through Windsor, Detroit. Now, it's not so much to do with the port, but with the rail, mostly truck now. 1/3 of all goods, all trade in the United States flow between Windsor and Detroit. 10,000 trucks a day. That's more traffic and more trade through Windsor, Detroit, than crosses Blue Water and all the Niagara crossings combined. Transportation is who we are. It's been our history. We were here originally because of marine transportation, and we're still here as a major marine port. We're here because of proximity to what is now the market across the United States. We are with less than 12 hours drive to 40 million people in the greatest economic market of the globe, that being the Midwestern United States and Southwest Ontario. If this region, the Great Lakes, was a country, we'd be the 3rd largest economy in the world. So this is major stuff, and we couldn't be better positioned. And any economy, much like armies depend on the flow, on logistics, so do economies. Economies depend on good logistics, great rail networks, great road networks, great marine systems. And here in Windsor, we've adopted a mission of creating an international integrated transportation system of marine, rail, road, and of course air here in the Windsor Airport. And nobody's better connected. When I say we have connection to the United States, it's not such as a Hamilton or Toronto, so you can be in New York in an hour, hour and a half, depending on traffic. You're in the States here in minutes. I mean, we are right here. The rail is right on the waterfront. From we are building the next major crossing. So we'll be the most integrated economy in the world right here. We'll be the most integrated transportation between two countries right here. And so I think really the challenge for us in Windsor in southwestern Ontario is, with the construction of this Gordie Howe International Crossing, this brand new bridge, 6-lane bridge at the busiest border crossing in North America, what does it mean for us as a port? So if we're the gateway to Canada from the American economy, are we going to be, is this going to be an economic boom for us, or is it going to be an economic bypass? And my message to the community and many of my colleagues has been, it's time to decide that now. This bridge will open in 2025. We can't wait to 2025 to decide, wow, look at all this traffic. We got to do something about this. It'll be too late. A couple of things is that logistic nodes develop quickly and they're really resistant to change. And secondly, if we don't develop and take advantage of this new trade crossing, this enhanced trade crossing, you can be sure our American cousins will, and they will do what we ought to have done on this side of the border. So I think we are ideally positioned, in Windsor for goods coming from the Midwest through this crossing to come into Windsor, in terms of distribution, repacking, bring it into here, repackage it, redistribute it, and send it back out. Bring it into here. Some may go to Ontario, some may go on a ship, some may go on a rail, because we have it all. As soon as you get off the bridge here, you're at the port, you're at the railway, you're at the 401, all in one spot. And I think we got a lot of thinking to do yet, how that's going to work, how we make that happen. But if a $6 billion investment in the best economic heartland, one of the best economic heartlands in the globe, is not enough of an advantage, I don't know, if we should keep our heads up after this.
I was going to ask that there's a huge investment going into build this new bridge. Did the Port of Windsor, I guess, receive any investment, or are there any new developments that are happening for the Port of Windsor to kind of continue to kind of transit merge what you said in terms of 2025 with the bridge?
Yeah, look, when I say a $6 billion bridge, I mean that's a lot of material. And our argument always is the best way to move bulk material and large materials is always by marine. And it's not just a bias because I'm in the port world. It just makes economic sense. You don't want police to organize perpetual police escorts for large wide loads or long loads. You don't want to be removing hydro lines and trying to get trucks around sharp corners. Put it on a large ship or a barge and move it down the Great Lakes and then you're already on the river, you're at the port, you just lift it off a crane and onto it. A lot of bulk materials, of course, concrete, aggregate. We, for 2 years now, we've been moving concrete and aggregate into that site, and it's going to continue for the next 2 years. I think the scale of this project really should be an episode of mega projects on television. I mean, this bridge, if you've been to Windsor, the GM headquarters is a tall glass tower downtown Detroit. It's 72 stories. Each tower of this bridge on the Canadian-American side is taller than that center tower.
Wow.
Oh yes, it's more than 70 stories high. The bridge is 6 lanes of traffic, plus 2 lanes of side road or emergency side roads, plus bike lane and bike lanes.
Wow.
So the scale of this will make, will make most bridges, seem like child's play. It's just going to be a massive undertaking. The amount of steel and concrete required for this, is once in a century. So, the beginnings of getting plazas down, footings down, has kept this port busy for 2 years now. Over the next 2 years, we expect to begin to see, just thousands of tons of steel come in, large concrete sections. The bridge is constructed by precast concrete, pre-stressed concrete sections, and those are very large, and they're going to be brought in by barge. We know that already, and then they're lifted up into place and hooked in. So the next 3 years are going to be good years for this community, good years for this port, and an exciting time to watch this built. I've heard the phrase, "Oh, this is like a once in a generation, once in a lifetime." No, it's once in a century. They built the last bridge in 1929. Then it'll be 4 generations before we see this scale of a project again.
Was the 1929 bridge the Windsor one we're talking about?
Yeah, Ambassador Bridge, yes. Yeah. The only bridge between our 2 countries in this region right now. Yeah.
You ever been on it? It's rickety. Yeah, you're like holding on.
It's a good bridge. It's a good bridge.
Cody Howell keep us grounded.
No, it's a solid bridge. It was showing its age, but I know the Ambassador Bridge Company's put a lot of money into refurbishing and restoring it, and I can tell you from when I was on the Parkway and bridge location site, we had access to engineering studies for that, and the road beds, the cables are rock solid. I don't have any fear going over it, but it is a cable bridge, so it literally does swing and move. Or if you're stuck on traffic on the bridge and the trucks move by you, you literally feel your car go up and down. It's a little unnerving, but consider it a carnival ride, nothing to fear.
It can be nerve. I don't know. My wife doesn't like it always. I stay to the middle lane. I don't like being on the side next to
that's funny.
there.
Yeah. Well, especially now that they've taken out the big old metal railings and they got this little guardrail like on the side of a highway. Yes. You think that's not stopping anything. And worse than that, you see right over top of it. There's nothing blocking your view.
Right down.
Yep.
Right to the port.
Overcome your fear.
There you go.
It's going to be a while since we can cross over. So.
Yeah, that's true too.
Yeah, I know.
So maybe talk a little bit about what do you see as, I know you're talking about, hey, we don't want to let it bypass. What's your idea? What do you think should happen on the Southern Ontario, the Windsor Essex area, maybe in conjunction with London? I'm not sure what the county is in London.
Yeah.
What should we do different as Canadians to help stimulate that not to be the bypass, but be that center hub for logistics and something different? What's your vision? What do you see that?
Well, I think initially it needs the brain power of a lot more people than just the port or just me. So we have pulled together a committee, a group in this region of the Chamber of Commerce, the Windsor Essex Development Corporation, the Gordie Howe Bridge, the port, the airport, to have created a function now where we're creating sector committees, transportation, education, industry, agriculture, to say, what does this bridge mean to us in this community? What could it mean? What we'll be able to do now that we couldn't have done? And what do we need to do today to do what we see? How do we create that vision? How do we get to that promised land? And so your question's a good one, and it's a question we are now asking, the leaders and the thinkers in each of the major industrial or economic sector in our region. We're not looking as far as London or Toronto yet. Right now, we thought about that initially. Should we be looking at, bringing people from Toronto to Windsor and Detroit to Cleveland, and say, how do we make this an economic superhighway to collectively? But the scale of that organizing effort would just take a massive amount of resources. And of course, COVID hasn't helped in the last year. So we decided, let's start local and build regionally and build nationally. I think one of the things that we need to do is certainly continue to push the federal government to create this as an international trade zone. Right from the Ambassador Bridge to Niagara, right into Toronto, Kingston. The Port of Hamilton was very successful about 2 years ago in getting the QEW between Niagara Falls, New York, and the Port of Hamilton designated a national trade corridor. And you'll say, well, what does that mean? Well, it means when Canada is promoting on a global stage its economic capacities and why you should come to Ontario or Canada, Ontario to do business in Hamilton, because you have this national trade corridor that easily and quickly moves goods. Remember, logistics is key. Well, at that point I thought, good for you, Hamilton, good job. I wasn't, resentful at all, but I did think to myself, they're eating our lunch, because the truth is, it's still taking you an hour to get to the States. It's taking you minutes to get to the States from here. What are we doing? So I thought the true trade corridor is between Canada and the U.S. But the important trade corridor in Ontario and Canada, more than anywhere else in this country, is between us, Hamilton, Niagara Falls. That's the true industrial corridor. And so we need to get the federal government to recognize that, and at the same time, create a level of excitement and a vision in our community among, like I said, the leaders of all of the agriculture industry, et cetera, to understand the opportunities and to begin to make investments. And I think the federal government's going to have to come to the table probably to seed some of this, as an industrial strategy. The Globe and Mail today just wrote that it's the whole question of industry strategies is back in vogue after being absent for a decade or two, where we start picking winners, where we start picking key sectors, where we start identifying those sectors that are most ripe for growth and need seeding and support and promotion. And so I think that's going to be critical as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because logistics in the last little bit has been getting more and more focused, which it seems to be going with what you're saying is being Windsor a logistical hub would make a lot more sense as we're getting more focused internationally on logistics as being a function that we all require. For the longest time, logistics was always seen as a byproduct. It's a waste, that it's a necessary evil. But now it's becoming more of it's a solution to a lot of people's problems. The final mile delivery, the big bulk movement of goods. Expanding it, the Windsor Airport would be a great idea. Making more of an international airport, relieve some of that pressure off of, Toronto. Have more of those international flights flying into Windsor, or more cargo freight coming into Windsor, like Hamilton did. Would be a neat idea.
Again, hats off to Hamilton. They got it right. They weren't going to compete necessarily for the passenger traffic, but they became a major cargo airport because it's easier to move goods in and out of Hamilton than it is out of the GTA. Right down on the 401 and 427. It's insane to drive in there. And Windsor has that same advantage. Bring goods into Windsor through there into a logistics node here, or bring it out the airport, bring it out through marine, through rail. I said when you give, I think, industry or shippers all options, all equally available, all equally attractive, I think you take a no off the table, as to why come to Windsor, why come to Canada, why come to Ontario, why come to Windsor. You begin to say, we have the lowest tax rate already. We're a free trade zone. We have all four modes of transportation. You have instant, direct access to the American market. You begin to build a case as to from why Windsor to why not, and that's where we've got to get to.
It's a lot, right? I think it's going to be an interesting concept as they develop it out. What I'd like to see as a person who works in transportation would be a giant, almost industrial park that has a truck stop, has rail siding right to it. It has access to the port. And trucks that are able to have a great sleeping area, good for truckers to go in, get some food. that would be something that, you know, I can see being developed close to the Gordie Howe Bridge,
Yeah.
and being a part of that community there, because it's needed, being bonded, having cold storage, because meat inspections are a pain. I know from our perspective of dealing with trucks and brokerages and all that, having that kind of one-stop solution, I think is something that, you know, sounds like that you guys are looking to do, and I think would be a fantastic way to kind of help promote the Windsor area, make it more into a hub versus a bypass, which is, you know, just to build a better highway.
With the real risk.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, you drop off the bridge onto our new $2 billion highway, and off you go. That wasn't a great, you know, advantage or plus for this community at all. You know, again, it's you know, building on our current strengths. You know, in terms of dealing with international flows of trucking, bonding, clearances, customs, duties, we're so good at that already. You know, we experienced that, you know, back in 9/11, you know, that infamous day of the trade towers. But you know, for us in this region, it wasn't just the shock and horror and trauma of that attack. We had 30 kilometers of trucks, 3 lanes wide, backed up from the foot of the river back out into the county for days and days and days until they got the border open. And we realized, you know, that security will always trump trade. And we also learned quickly is that we had to get new systems in place to move these trucks and goods through quickly. And those same systems apply to shipping and rail and air. So, you know, systems like FAST and et cetera were developed, you know, pre-clearance, pre-certifications, all these things were put in place. That was, you know, driven through, you know, through initiatives and major key transportation players from this community. And so we have that expertise. We need to continue to build on it. You know, the example I use in my talks in the community in terms of the potential is, you know, I look for a parallel. You know, in the parallel I grab, you know, it is the Atlanta Hartfield, Hartfield, I think it is, airport, the Atlanta airport. And it became the largest, busiest airport in North America. And I thought, you know, you think, and it became the hub, you know, of systems of transit. And you think, if you look at a map, you wouldn't have put it down on the bottom right corner of the United States. You would have put it in the center of the states, or more north, a little more west, you know, centralize it a bit. But at some point, you know, a few decades back, somebody had the vision to say, you know, what if we made an airport attractive enough to track, you know, airlines to come here? We will service your airport. You can get on, switch to another flight, and go out again. And somebody had that vision. I'm sure it started slowly, and I'm sure it seemed like a wild idea, but they grew into, as I said, to the largest, busiest airport in North America. It's not just the airport, though. I mean, if you've ever been to Atlanta, they call it a ring road. It's just a large freeway that literally does a circle around Atlanta. And as you come, if you swing around the airport, not only are you impressed by the scale of that airport, but the industry that just goes on kilometer after kilometer after kilometer along that route, that's all related to airport. It's all logistics related to the airport. It's all services related to the airport. The airport was an economic generator. And that's what we need to do with logistics. We need to say logistics in this community, all 4 modes, are an economic generator. You know, the second analogy I use is, you mentioned, you know, large truck yards and stuff, you know, service centers. One of the largest service centers in the West is about 50 or 60 miles west of Regina on the Trans-Canada. Not in Regina, you know, not in Winnipeg, you know, not in the GTA, but in the middle of nowhere. Now, is land cheap? Maybe, but it's just an odd place. You know, but what it tells you is if you have the vision, it'll work. So I think you're right. If we want to be a logistics hub, part of that would be talking to our, you know, leaders in the trucking industry in this area. What attracts truckers? You know, as you say, sleeping facilities, you know, shower, recreation, food, rest, truck servicing, washing, security. You know, all those things will attract, and they'll say, you know what? I'm not going to stop in Toledo on the way through, or I'm not going, you know, I'm going to stop in Windsor. You know, so, you know, of those 10,000 trucks, you know, if 10,000 trucks a day see Windsor as a great place, you know, for a service stop or a layover, that's great for this community. And if industry sees that, oh, wait a minute, we have no problem, getting access to available trucks in the Windsor area. It's a good place to locate a plant because you don't have a problem finding trucks, or trucks aren't traveling long distances to your plant and away from your plant, adding costs. They're already here. So I think, as you've suggested, Matt, it builds on itself. You have the trucks coming, so you add a service. A service, attracts the availability of a concentrated transportation node. People are going to take advantage of it. Just as the old truism that new roads don't alleviate traffic; they create new traffic. Yeah. And it's true as well. When you have a port, people locate here. They didn't locate further down the lake or further up the lake from us. They located here. There was a port here. So, this is where ADM located. This is where, St. Mary Cement located. It's where Lafarge located, because the port is here. Yeah. And the transportation links are here. And so we just got to keep building on our success and seeing it at a much larger scale.
And it truly is very unique because, like you said, it has a lot of different nodes right there, which a lot of communities don't. No,
we are the envy of any community. Yeah.
And we should, as Canadians, really emphasize on that, because we've talked about it in previous talks that we had. We talked about the going out to Newfoundland with the OceanX and the competitor TMSI. Like, we have these such unique logistical problems here in Canada that's not developed anywhere. Like, one of our own guys here he had shipments out to none of it, and the first thing he goes, "How do I ship to none of it?" And we said, he's like, "Do I ship it by water? Do I ship it by air? I can't ship it by road. Like, how do we go about doing this, right?"
Yeah.
Out of need, right? And a lot of people don't understand that the ease of that transportation, the ease of that logistics will attract people to the area. Something simple as building a yard out in Windsor that's international use for everybody. They pay for a spot. They can drop their trailer. If you have 10,000 trucks dropping their trailers there, and then they have car rental, nearby, so they can grab a car, go buy a gift for his wife on the way back to Toronto, spends the night there instead of, being tired, driving down the road, and then causing an accident. Because he's like, "I really want to get home." But if he has a safe haven spot to stop, we're just increasing that flow, right? So I think that's a very, great way to look at it to help promote that project, because it connects not only the port, it connects the bridge that we're talking about, like you said, the airport, the community of Windsor, which needs to be revived as well. It was once a great city when automotive was great, but now it needs to have that different.
Yeah, it's not our future. It's still core to who we are as a community, and a lot of great paying jobs, highly skilled tool die makers. But you got to continuously diversify your economy. You got to continuously evolve your economy. And given that service and logistics, we're a consumer society in America. We're increasingly becoming a consumer society, and consumer societies work through the movement of goods, and logistics is the core.
Perfect. I was going to ask, so when the completion of the bridge is done, is the Ambassador Bridge going to be closed, or is that going to be operational as well?
Oh, it's absolutely going to be operational. As I said in my introduction, I was intimately involved in the siting of the new Gordie Howe Bridge with the government. And our message then, in answer to anybody who asked, was this is not a replacement. The volume of trade and the growth of trade demands more bridge lanes. Given that we have 4 lanes at the Ambassador Bridge doing more volume and more dollars of trade than every other crossing in Ontario combined, we were a little shy of space. And if you're in Windsor and you see the trucks lined up over the bridge and down here in line, we need more. And I just said a few minutes ago, new roads create new traffic. New bridges are going to create new trade routes.
Yep. I think the Ambassador Bridge is privatized right now, right?
Sorry?
Is the current bridge private or government owned?
It's private. Yeah, it's owned by one corporation. Matty Maroon just sadly died a few months back. He was a sole owner. It was not even a public corporation. So it was one of those things. You say, one of the coolest things, when you met him or talked to him, is that he owns the bridge. I mean, he owns the bridge. He's not the president of a corporation. I mean, he owns the bridge.
Best pickup line ever. What do you got? See that bridge? That's mine.
So then how about for the new bridge coming up? Is that the same thing?
So new bridge is being constructed and fully funded by the government. It'll be recovered through fees. It's under a P3 type of project. They have a different name for it, but it's a P3 essentially. And so the company the consortium that's building it will also operate it for 25 years. And they have certain performance standards, and they'll be paid for construction and delivery. But the fees all come back to the government, and they pay out the construction and management costs from there. But it will have a public authority. It hasn't been finalized yet, though there will be a public authority that overlooks the bridge operation. Much like there's a Blue Water Bridge Authority, and there's Rainbow Bridge Authority in Niagara and all that. There will be a Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority of some type.
Mr. Steve, did you have anything that you wanted to add before we start closing off on this wonderful podcast about the Port of Windsor?
Well, other than to tell you that during this last year of COVID, a lot of industries struggled, but the shipping industry continued. As I mentioned, unfortunately, earlier in my comments, that it was on the backs of some really unfortunate people who couldn't leave a ship, but the ships kept moving and the goods kept moving. There were very few days lost on the globe to the movement of goods and supplies. And it doesn't take long for the shipping industry to be interrupted before you'll notice it so quickly. I'm sure in the last year, you've been going to stores and you say, yeah, we haven't got that. Or you go online that says, out of stock, don't know when it's coming in. Those are just the minor. Yeah, go to a liquor store. Yeah. You'll find nothing, so few products, difficult to find products from offshore. Yeah. Because it's all coming by ship. And it's critical. We absolutely, our economy depends on the movement of goods continuously, and interruptions are painful. That's why we're all concerned about the current labor situation right now in Montreal, looking forward to that getting resolved. But I mean, Montreal was on strike last year for a few weeks, and suddenly, electronics and products were missing off the shelves, and they would tell you, well, there's a strike in Montreal. And I said, I know. Because I'm feeling it personally too. But the truth was that we persevered through COVID. All ports were declared an essential service. Our ports never closed one day during the whole COVID thing. While many of us have the opportunity to work from home, the port workers each day continue to work. Every day. They had to take certain precautions, of course, and protocols to ensure their own safety. But we had no cases of COVID in our port. We were very relieved by that. We actually had only 2 cases of COVID the entire year, but just this week there's a ship that finally up in Thunder Bay has unfortunately had a COVID outbreak, but that's the only ship in an entire year.
Wow, that's an achievement.
So our protocols are working. The safety, the protection of our on-ship folk and our onshore folk are working, and our communities are safe because of it. And our communities are continuing. We're still moving the steel and the aggregates for construction and products that people need. Food products and consumer products haven't stopped. And I think when you hear, I went to buy a car or a replacement car this past February, and they said, yeah, well, we don't have any more of those because they didn't build a car all of March. We never stopped.
That's amazing. That's an achievement. That's something to be proud of, and that we should recognize. Again, we thank the trucker that all through life.
And the truckers never stopped. Yeah.
Exactly. Right. And
yeah.
we should recognize all logistics professionals, because we're warehousing. For the people working at agriculture on the farms, a lot of them didn't stop. It kept going and going. It's been truly a hard year for everybody, and thankfully a lot of the people that work in these industries kept pushing through, and we were able to put electronics, food, clothing on our backs, and
yep.
The average Canadian forgets about how really it gets there. They just go, oh, like you said, oh, it's out of stock, my day is ruined. But it's a lot of time, effort, and money that goes into making it happen the way it happens. So that's a great call.
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
Well, I appreciate this opportunity.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for your time, Steve, and knowledge. I definitely learned a lot on this one. It's something that I don't have very much knowledge on. So I'm definitely more well-rounded about the port of Windsor and just ports in general.
Me too. I like it. It's one thing that I don't get enough of. I'd like to, learn more about it, and I'm glad we had these conversations. And we're hoping to one day when COVID opens up, like we said, we'll come down to the port of Windsor. We'll do a recording what it looks like.
Absolutely, love to give you a tour, and bring you across the Ambassador Bridge, KP.
Try not to be scared.
Yeah, that'll be me. I'll stay on this side.
Yeah. So you're gonna go home tonight and say that came on a boat, that came on a boat, that came on a boat.
That's right. Well, thank you so much, Steve.
Okay, guys.
And thanks for telling us everything we need to know about the Port of Windsor. Anybody ever has any questions about the Port of Windsor, or want to get in touch with somebody about Highway H20, which is the alternative highway?
Absolutely.
Reach out.
Yes,
Steve. He has great contacts. It's a really interesting wealth of knowledge. Or if you're just even curious about more about it, I highly recommend just even go on the Port of Windsor website. They have pretty cool photos, what goes down there, and reach out and learn a little bit more. So thank you so much.
You bet.